Alright, hello Math 2 students. This lesson is going to be covering the section on negative exponents, which should be day 4 of unit 2.1. We're going to start off with a really quick video to intro negative exponents. It's going to summarize what we need to talk about with that, which will be really helpful. Let's see if I can get to that.
Hey there everyone, welcome back to Mashup Math. My name is Anthony, and thank you again so much for joining me on this mini lesson. Just go ahead and get started. Hey there everyone, thank you again for joining me on this lesson where we are going to explore the properties of negative exponents. But first, let's reactivate what we already know about positive exponents. For example, 5 raised to the second power. We know that this is equal to 5 times 5. Another way to look at this is calling it 5 squared. And we also know that 5 times 5 is equal to 25. And that's pretty easy and something that we should be familiar with. But what if that exponent was a negative 2 instead of a positive 2? When we think of negative or the word negate, we think of it as performing the opposite or inverse operation. So with positive exponents, our operation is multiplication. So what is the inverse or opposite of multiplying? You are correct if you said dividing. So in this case, we are going to express as a fraction that 5 to the negative second power is equal to 1 over 5 to the second power. Notice how we threw away the negative sign in the exponent. Let's see that again one more time. And since we know that 5 squared is equal to 25, we can conclude that 5 to the negative second power is equal to 1/25, or 0.04. So now we can apply our understanding of negative exponents to an example where we want to simplify the expression 2 to the negative 8 power multiplied by 2 to the positive 5 power. Now when we multiply exponents with the same base, we know that there's a rule, and that rule is that we can add the exponents together. In this case, negative 8 plus 5 is equal to negative 3. So now we have 2 raised to the negative third power. And we know that since our exponent is negative, that we can rewrite this as 1 over 2 to the third power. Again, we remove the negative sign. We also know that 2 to the third power is equal to positive 8. And we can conclude that 2 to the negative 3 power is equal to either 1 over 8 or 0.125. Now, there are different ways to tackle a problem like this that will still get you to the same correct answer. So I'll leave you with a question, and that is, could you have simplified this expression using a different strategy? And if so...
Alright, so we don't really need much more than that. So let's see if it'll let me back out of here. Alright, so they give you really nice examples, kind of starting you on the basics of negative exponents. So what does it mean, excuse me, to negate something? It means to do the opposite or the inverse of something, hence negative exponents. So the opposite of multiplying is going to be dividing, really, is what we're doing. So here you're filling the blanks for that first section of your notes. Go ahead and write those in. In order to make the exponents positive, you throw away the negative sign when you move the base to the top or the bottom. I also would like you guys to put up in the top right-hand corner of your notes a little like cloud kind of thing like this, and write the phrase cross the line, change the sign. Cross the line, change the sign. That's going to be our motto for negative exponents. I'm going to kind of show you why that is. So let's breeze through this guy. From the video, they kind of talked about when you have a negative exponent, it affects the thing it's attached to, first of all. Really, you can think of this as x to the negative 2 over 1. And our phrase is cross the line, change the sign, which has to do with the fact that when you have a negative exponent, you have to move it to the opposite part of the fraction. Right now it's in the numerator. Let's bring it down to the denominator. when we cross the fraction bar, the line, we have to change the sign. So instead of negative, it's now positive. Now, I can't just leave nothing in the top part of the fraction, so I got to put a 1 there. Be careful to note, though, this is not a reciprocal. You don't just flip everything in the fraction. You got to leave things that don't have negative exponents exactly where they are. Same thing here. We've got a negative 3 as an exponent for 2. It's really over 1 right now. Cross the line, change the sign. We're going to bring it down to the bottom. Cross the line, change the sign, means it's 2 to the 3rd power. And I got to put a 1 there because there's nothing there. Not because I'm reciprocal the fraction. I'm not doing that. And then in the video they talked about you could simplify this a little more and make it 1 over 8, which you should do. Last one, you'll notice that r to the negative 5th power is actually in the bottom of the fraction, or the denominator this time. We are still going to cross the line, change the sign, and we're going to do that by bringing the r to the negative 5th up to the numerator, the top of the fraction. Cross the line, change the sign, means instead of negative, now it is a positive 5. You could put a 1 down there if you want, but it's really not necessary, so you can just simplify it to r to the positive 5th power. Okay, a little bit more complicated with these ones now. If you look at this first one, we've got a whole parentheses group going to the negative 4th power. Now it's really over 1 again. Right now it's in the numerator of the fraction. Let's bring it down to the denominator. And cross the line, change the sign. So I'm not going to change anything else except for that negative 4. I'm not going to make this negative 2 or this negative 2. I just cross the line, change the sign of the exponent. So it's now to the 4th power. And there's really a 1 up there. Now let's simplify this power down here. Remember in our last lesson we talked about you rewrite it 4 times if it's to the 4th power. Notice I've got all positive exponents now, so I don't have to worry about that. So I've got 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. If you either plug that in your calculator or do it mentally, you get 16. I have y squared, y squared, y squared, and y squared. If I add up all those 2's, because remember these are exponents now, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 is y to the 8th. And hopefully you caught the fact that we still have to put it back into our fraction, so it's really 1 over 16 y to the 8th for that answer. Now this last one we're going to tackle together is a little bit different. Be kind of cautious about this. Notice there are no negative exponents here. And we can create negative exponents, but there's actually a simpler way to do it. So I'm going to show you the 2 ways that you can solve this and then suggest a certain way to you. If one way makes more sense for you, go for that. If we do this just like normal, this is division. So really I'm subtracting these numbers. Well, 3 minus 5 means that I would end up with x to the negative 2 power. Now, I don't really want negatives, so I'd have to end up switching this so I have an extra step in the middle. Not super complicated, but once you do it with a bunch of them, it kind of gets a little hectic. So I'm going to show you a simpler way to think about this. Back when we did things like this, which is very, very similar to this problem, so kind of sidestep from here over to here real quick. Back when we did this, an easier way to think about this, I think, than saying subtraction would be to think about what is the difference between 5 and 3, which is pretty much still subtraction, but a little different. In other words, how many numbers are between 5 and 3? Or if you have $5 and I have $3, what's the difference between the amount of money that we have? Well, it's 2. Where should I put that remainder, though? Where are there more x's at? Well, if I was to write it out all longhand, really what's happening is that 3 of these x's are getting canceled out, and the 2 remaining ones end up on the top because that's where more of them were to start with, which is why we always said it was x squared over 1 or just x squared by itself. Now take a look at this guy. This time, the difference between 3 and 5 is still 2. If I have $3 and you have $5, you still have 2 more than me. But if I was to write it out longhand now, I have 3 on the top and 5 on the bottom. And when I simplify things, where does that remainder end up at? On the bottom. So that might be a simpler way to think about it. Just figure out what the difference between the two positive numbers is, and then put that remainder where it belongs. So really I have 1 over x squared instead of x squared over 1. So a little bit of difference between these two problems. But this would be our answer for the one that you guys are doing. All right, so you've got a couple problems to try out now. You should have 5 of them here. Please try them on your own. Do not just watch this to copy. You're not really helping yourself, okay? Please try it yourself. This is going to help you see where you're making your mistakes, and then press play when you're ready to see the answer. Alrighty. First one should be 1 over x to the 10th. Pretty basic for that one. Just cross the line, change the sign, bring it down to the bottom. This one, the whole group has to move down to the bottom. So it's really 1 over 4b to the 3rd. Whole thing squared. Notice I changed the sign, didn't change any of these signs. If I simplify that out, 4b cubed times 4b cubed is 16b to the 6th, because I'm adding those 3's, multiplying those 4's. So really this whole thing is 1 over 16b to the 6th. Now this one, please pay special attention to this one because so many people got this wrong when we practiced. Now if you look at this, the only thing with the negative power is that w. The 2 does not have a negative power, which means even though this w has to move up there, that 2 should not move at all. It needs to stay exactly where it is in the top of the fraction. Do not move it down to the bottom. It has no negative exponent. Do not treat it as that. The w to the 3rd is now going to move to the top. Cross the line, change the sign. We now have w to the positive 3 power. And there's nothing left on the bottom, so I could put a 1, or I really don't need that denominator anymore, and I could just get rid of it. It's really just 2w to the 3rd. Okay, but please be careful about that. If something does not have a negative exponent, don't treat it as such. Leave it where it is. This one is kind of similar to the very last problem we did. You've got 4 on the top, 10 on the bottom. The difference between those two numbers is 6. There's more x's on the bottom though, so my remainder of x to the 6th should go there. The last one we have really over 1 right now. 6 to the negative 2 power has to go to the denominator. Becomes 6 to the positive 2 power. Don't forget to simplify this. 6 squared means 6 times 6, which is 36. So this is really 1 over 36 for your final answer for that one. All right, we're going to work through these last two problems together. Please make sure you're paying attention because these are definitely a little more tricky. What I'd suggest when you've got big problems like this is circle the only things that are going to be affected by the negative exponent. Now notice, negative 3 is not an exponent. It is a coefficient. Do not move it by doing cross the line, change the sign. Negative coefficients are not the same as exponents. The only things we are going to change are these two ones right there. Okay, really the whole thing is over 1 right now. Here's how I'd suggest you do it. Rewrite the fraction bar and rewrite everything as is. And actually I can put these guys together. M squared and M squared is actually M to the 4th. And then these two negative exponents are going to go to the bottom of the fraction. W to the 4th, W squared. Oops, and I forgot about this 5 here. Can't forget that. If I simplify things, negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, still M to the 4th. If I combine these now positive exponents in the bottom, I get W to the 6th. Last one, we've got two coefficients here. If you divide them both by 3, you get 4 over 5. 7 on the top, 9 on the bottom, difference of 2. X squared goes on the bottom. y to the third, y to the first, difference of 2, y squared goes on top. Homework on the backside.